We have 17 days until the NBA trade deadline, and the Jimmy Butler rumors are absolutely heating up prior to that February 6th deadline. I am Nic Rohloff. This is the Heat Report by Chat Sports. Brian Windhorst dropped a lot of new nuggets on the Butler rumors, on if he is going to be traded, how quickly this market is transpiring, and the goals of Jimmy Butler personally. And before we get into that, a Butler trade could happen in the next 17 days. And to make sure you do not miss when that happens, be subscribed, have your notifications turned on, because when he gets dealt, we are going to go live. And if he still is on this roster heading into deadline day, we'll also be live for that. So don't miss a thing around the Heat Report. Hit that sub button, click that noti icon. Make sure it's clicked onto all, not just personalized, so you never miss a video or live show that we do. All right, there's a lot of things coming around to Butler, three of them in particular. One, Jimmy Butler is still focusing on trying to get to the Phoenix Suns. It's been widely known. Nothing has changed. I know there's a little bit of a buzz around the Milwaukee Bucks, but it seems like his goal is to be teaming up with KD and Devin Booker. Miami, after meeting with Butler, Pat Riley, Mickey Arison, seemed to be working harder towards a trade. And then apparently Windhorst also said that half the NBA wants to help facilitate a deal and potentially get some cap clearing moves for them personally. But we'll start with the Jimmy Butler to Phoenix thing, because we've known this for quite a while, but Windhorst is doubling down on Butler's aspirations to become a Phoenix Sun, saying that Jimmy's number one focus is getting traded, preferably to Phoenix, not getting traded to Team X or Team Y, to Phoenix. So anything that you want to bring that's rational, if it doesn't mean getting traded to Phoenix, Jimmy's not going to be interested in it right now. And I really can't fathom how often this report is coming out. Like, it is so obvious he only wants to go to Phoenix. We've talked about this ad nauseum here on the channel. But it's not like the Suns are some super team. If they were like 35-15, like, sure, I would understand. At the time of filming this, they're 21-20. It's the same record as the Miami Heat. Sure, maybe because of KD and Book, they have a better chance to win a title, and Jimmy feels like he can really elevate that team and locker room over there. But it's not like they're head and shoulders above the Miami Heat right now. Plus, the Heat are playing in a way easier conference in terms of making the finals. It's a bloodbath in the Western Conference with teams like Memphis, teams like Denver, teams like Oklahoma City. Like, it would be easier for him to stay in Miami and win. But that's neither here nor there at this point. When you think of other teams, I do want to continue to bring up the Milwaukee Bucks. They are not out of the running yet. Now, Chris Haynes did report about 2 weeks ago that Jimmy has kind of made it known that he would not want to play for the Bucks or Memphis Grizzlies, but we've had multiple reports come out from Sam Amick and Brian Windhorst kind of derailing that to a degree with the Milwaukee Bucks. So Jimmy could be open for not really a reunion, but teaming up with Damian Lillard. We know that he wanted to do that in the past, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. So keep an eye on the Bucks. If the Suns trade never materializes, I think the Bucks could be the team that swoops in right before the deadline and makes a deal for Jimmy Butler. But in regards to Phoenix, let me know. Do you think a trade happens with the Phoenix Suns and Jimmy Butler where he is playing with KD and Book? If you think it does, type Y for yes. If you think that's not going to happen, type your N for no. It's today's pinned comments. You can hit with YouTube ad break. Scroll down and let it play and answer today's question. After being very pessimistic about a trade actually going down between Miami and Phoenix, I think that there's a higher chance that it happens over the next 17 days. It feels like there is a lot of momentum heading towards a trade for Jimmy Butler in Miami. Jimmy, I thought, has given adequate effort over the past 2 games since returning from suspension. I was very open about thinking it was a train wreck to bring him back into this locker room, and it still very well may turn into that. But at least through 2 games, it hasn't been as abysmal as I thought it would be. But we have detailed and talked about that meeting between Pat Riley, Mickey Arison, and Jimmy Butler prior to his return last Friday against the Denver Nuggets. Well, according to Brian Windhorst, nothing has changed coming out of that meeting. And actually, if anything, it's ramped up trade talks. Windhorst said that since Jimmy had his meeting with Mickey Arison on Thursday, there is no doubt an uptick in discussions around Butler. The Heat shifted into a new gear after that meeting. And I do want to bring it back to this because many people are going to ask, well, why would we trade Jimmy after we just looked like the 73-9 Warriors on Sunday against the Spurs, where the Heat blew out San Antonio by 20 plus, finally inserted Kel'el Ware into a lineup with Jimmy and Bam. Why are we trading him? Well, he still doesn't want to be here. It's very obvious that that's the case, and you're not going to retain him in the offseason. And I think he will continue to show up for the Miami Heat every single day and play basketball. That is something that was discussed between Jimmy and ownership in that meeting. But I'll say this. I think the ownership and front office kind of made a thing was like, hey, if you continue to show up and give us actual effort over the next 2 weeks, we'll try to get a deal done before the deadline. But if that deal doesn't materialize and he's still on this roster on February 7th after that deadline, I think Pandora's box may be open because that's when Jimmy Butler really may start dogging it and he ultimately may be pushed away from the team as well. That is where things get a little bit interesting. And coming up in just a bit, we're going to talk more on Jimmy Butler and more potential rumors surrounding a trade before that February 6th deadline. But we are sponsored by Prize Picks, the #1 daily fantasy sports platform out there. It's the one that I trust and play the most. It's so easy to play. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you could win up to 1,000 times your cash right now on Prize Picks. And whether it's football, whether it's basketball, whether it's hockey, you can combine and play in so many different ways. But the big game in football is almost here. It's now or never. Don't miss out on the last football game of the season with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the big game. Prize Picks is also giving away a free pick for the big game, where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw 1 yard to win. If you are correct on at least one more stat projection, you can win real cash. And we still have a couple games before that big game, by the way. We got some action between a couple heavy hitters in football this upcoming Sunday. I'm taking the less than on Jalen Hurts rushing yards, more than on Jaden Daniels passing yards, and more than on James Cook rushing yards. An example of how you can play a simple 3-player entry. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineup. So join me and the millions of others playing PrizePicks on a daily basis. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, download PrizePicks today. Use code CLNS when signing up to get $50 instantly after you play that first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, next up here on the program, I actually do want to look at the Phoenix Suns side of this because we talked earlier in the show about how a trade may actually happen between Phoenix and Miami with Jimmy Butler. And it's because that the Bradley Beal situation might not be as complicated as I once thought. I thought with his $50 million contract, his no trade clause, there would be no teams lining up to potentially acquire Bradley Beal in a 3 or 4 team trade because we know for 1,000% certainty that Pat Riley in Miami does not want to take on Beal's contract. Well, there's 4 teams that I think we should monitor in terms of potentially taking on Bradley Beal in a multi-team trade. The Milwaukee Bucks, Toronto Raptors, Minnesota Timberwolves, and Detroit Pistons. I'm a little skeptical of the Minnesota Timberwolves. It was reported that they might be in this kind of Jimmy Butler sweepstakes, but Milwaukee apparently actually could be more interested in acquiring Bradley Beal than Jimmy Butler and pairing Beal with Giannis and Dame in that backcourt where then Middleton and Bobby Portis get shipped and rerouted probably to Miami and Jimmy ends up in Phoenix. Toronto with Kelly Olynyk expiring, Bruce Brown's expiring. They are looking to get in on the action as well to maybe acquire future draft capital. And the most linked team to Bradley Beal throughout this whole saga to this point has been the Detroit Pistons, and that was hammered home once again when Windhorst and Sam Amick and Mark Stein had been reporting over the weekend. And Brian Windhorst dropped this specific quote that I really wanted to share with everyone. He said that he had a team on Friday call me and say, hey, this team is trying to dump some salary. And they all of a sudden had to end our phone call to go do something bigger. I speculate that it has to do with Butler and not just the direct Butler trade, but 3 and 4 team trades. I feel like there is starting to be some movement on the Jimmy Butler trade front. Everybody was curious to see what would happen when Jimmy Butler's 7-game suspension ended. Would he return to Miami? How would that kind of remarriage happen? And would it be chaos on the court? But now that teams across the league have seen him step back on the court wearing a Heat uniform and actually kind of performed relatively well and not just run through the motions, teams are like, all right, we're not going to be able to buy Jimmy Butler for dirt cheap, and they can start to actually negotiate to have a real deal and maybe a real trade go through. But as we've always said here on the channel, we know for 1,000% certainty this is going to be a 3-team deal at minimum. There's just no way this happens between Miami and Phoenix straight up. Predict it for me. There is 17 days before that NBA trade deadline. Will Jimmy Butler be dealt before that? Type T if he's traded. Type K if you think he ultimately gets kept by Miami. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. I've actually changed my tune. I think a Jimmy Butler trade happens. I've said over the past week and a half that it just seems so far-fetched that Miami and Phoenix are able to get another one or two teams into this deal, and Butler ends up in Phoenix, Beal ends up in this third team, and the Heat get the assets they want. Because we know Miami has been very much a stickler on what they want in return. It's been like my way or the highway, which it's always been with Pat Riley, but are they going to prioritize contracts that expire this year, or are they going to want to try to stay competitive for this season? Because it's been widely speculated that Miami really wants to make the postseason this year, because we've talked about it. If they make the playoffs this year, well, their 25 and 27 first-round picks get shipped out to Oklahoma City and Charlotte, respectively. But if they miss the playoffs and are picking inside the lottery, the Heat will then have their first-round selection in 2025, making the 2026 first-round pick go to OKC unprotected, and the 2027 Charlotte pick, oh yeah, that becomes unprotected in 2028. So the Heat want to make the postseason to get those kind of assets that they have pushed out already finally out of the system. So they have more clarity on what draft picks they can trade into the future. So they want to remain competitive, and I think they can make the playoffs even if they got nothing back for Jimmy Butler. But I'll be intrigued to see if they would take a Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis return for Jimmy Butler, or do they want expiring contracts and draft capital to help build for the future? That's really the question here. And that's what I've been asking this entire time, right? Like, what will they prioritize? I do think a trade is going to happen very soon. It's just more or less what is the Heat's package that they're getting back from these 2-3 teams ultimately going to be. And then an underrated question that we have to ask ourselves, if they are not getting a all-star or a legit player in return to fill Jimmy Butler's role in the starting lineup, who does start? Nikola Jovic has been playing exceptional off the bench, has great chemistry with Kel'el Ware and Tyler Hero, but can he play the three? Is that lineup good enough defensively? Will it be Haywood Highsmith? Will it be potentially Jaime Jaquez Jr., who has been kind of crowned as the Jimmy Butler replacement? I like Jovic's fit with that group a lot more offensively, but the defensive questions come into concern. And the complete opposite with Haywood Highsmith, where it would help the Heat defensively, but the offense then becomes a question. I'm absolutely intrigued to see who ultimately becomes that connecting piece in the front court, assuming that it's going to be Bam and Ware at the 4-5, Hero and Duncan in the 1-2. Who's going to be that 3 for the Miami Heat long term? I guess we'll have to see. And that's why you subscribe to the channel, because we will have you covered leading up to the NBA trade deadline in just 17 days. Also going to be live for the game tonight against the Portland Trail Blazers and live for the games leading up to the deadline all season long. So hit that sub button. Join us here at the Heat Report.